So this last weekend I was playing a new game called Satisfactory. I had access to the first 3 tiers of the game, and then the game comes out on March 19th into early access. So it's not the finished version of the game, they're still developing it. And one of the questions that everybody was asking me during my live streams is, is this a good game? What do I think about it? They were just trying to gauge whether or not they should potentially look into the game themselves. And if you had asked me if the game was a good or not within the very first hour of playing the game, I would say it was quite clunky. However, I went back and I replayed that first hour again, and it made a lot more sense the second time that I was playing through it. So if we just talk about what the game is kind of, well, a lot like what people were talking about. It's kind of like Scuba Noctua and Factorio had a baby, and this is it. So it's a hand-built world that is very, very big. And we'll talk about that in a minute there as far as the positives and negatives that I think about as far as the map is concerned. But the game itself, it started to click for me after I was in it for, 3 hours, I would say. Within the first 3 hours, once I got near the end of Tier 2 and the beginning of Tier 3, I started to really lay out my factory and started to optimize my conveyors and optimize how things were going to be produced and the rate at which things were going to be produced, and how that progression was starting to clearly be laid out in front of me. That's right around the same time that the space elevator comes into play, and you start to move away from your very first fuel source, which is manually intensive. You have to go out there and chop down leaves and make it into biofuel. And that is just kind of a little annoying, but it progresses you to the point where it feels rewarding when you finally don't have to go and do all of that somewhat tedious activity. So one of the things I did after my 10-hour live stream is I went up to the top of my big tower and I just took a flight across the map at a very, very high elevation to just see how big the map was. And then I landed in different spots and explored the map in different areas. And I'm going to tell you this right now, that the map is really big. And just to give you an idea, this is from a peak that's like right at this spot, looking back at a tower that is 2 kilometers tall. To give you some sort of idea, that is super tall. We're talking about a minute. It takes about a minute to jump off of that and land on the ground. So while the map is not procedurally generated, it is a very large map, and it has, probably the key thing here is that it has many, many different biomes. And as you move through these different biomes, they have different themes, and some of them have different music as well. So you're going to move through these biomes, I feel like, naturally, as you move through all tier 6 or whatever tiers you have available when the game is fully done. And you're going to kind of choose what direction you're going to go around this world in order to get the resources that you need in order to make the technology to complete the ultimate task, whatever that is. So I think that'll make for a very interesting playthrough, especially the first time. Does that take away from the replay value? I'm not 100% sure, because I don't know how much of the map you truly have to explore in order to achieve your objective. You definitely can spawn into different parts of the map which have different elements and stuff that you have to deal with as far as setting up your base and whatnot. So I think there's definitely replay value in that, and that you can start in different spots. And the big thing here that I would say is, as we're building up these big facilities and figuring out all the logistics and everything, space is one thing that is truly important. Or at least it seems like it's really important, because you're going to have to put all of these buildings, and not all the biomes that you're in have terrain that's going to be friendly to big open bases. So you might have to get really creative with your logistics and how you're shipping things around, and what kind of automated transportation systems you put in. Now, if we talk about the game from the perspective of what we have access to, as far as when the game is going to go into early access versus potentially where it might be when it's done. The thing is, I don't know what's all going to be in there when it's done, but I know there's certain things that are not in this March 19th version of the game that you might see in the background of the actual website. So you see in the background there's all this stuff, this massive stuff. And one thing that they've mentioned is that the trains are not going to be there right off the bat. They're just still working on that. So this is one of those things where the game is still obviously in development. We're talking about early access because they're trying to develop it and make it better, so that when the game is done, the game is better than if we had never been involved. At least that's how they're, pitching it. So if we're talking about replay value from that perspective, getting into the game earlier will mean that if we go and play through the game again later, they're going to add more stuff that we may not have had beforehand. Whereas if you're playing the game from a finished perspective, you pretty much will, you may not get as many new things, which is the draw of getting into an early access game, because you're getting in at the start and you kind of see how it develops as you go. So the most important thing, did I enjoy the game? And I'm going to tell you right now, yeah, I did. I did not enjoy that first hour, that first playthrough, but the second time I did it, and once I knew what I was doing, yeah, I did enjoy it. And I feel like the intricacies of how I want to set up bases and whatnot, my brain's still spinning on how I want to try that. And I think there's going to be a lot of good content that I'll be able to create and discuss with you guys as far as, the feeds and speeds of equipments and how that's laid out and making cool stuff. I think that's going to be pretty cool. I don't do as much let's play stuff. I do more experimenting, and I feel like there's a still room for a good amount of experimentation in this game and how things are laid out. So I think it's pretty cool. And not only that, it's a really chill game, and I like the fact that it is fairly relaxing. Now let's talk about some things where I think the game has some work to do. First and foremost, I think there's two big things that are a negative to me. I don't feel like the game has much character. So there are these characters that have put you down there. They're like from the Fix-It Corp, and they have some sort of announcer lady that kind of comes on and tells you what's happening. The thing is, she seems very, very dry, and I feel like there's better examples of NPCs that are out there that are well written and are kind of witty and funny or whatever it is, and they're just far more engaging as far as you wanting to hear the next thing they have to say, whereas when she talks, she's just kind of blah, she's really not, she's telling you what happens without making it interesting. So I think two games that do a really good job of this is like Gladys from Portal. I mean, legendary, right? That's obviously a high bar. The other good example is from Fortnite Survive the Storm. Before it was Battle Royale and everything. There's a robot character, and she is just very, very well written, and she does a really good job of adding character to what is a relatively mundane task or boring task. She makes it far more interesting, or shall I say the writers that write her content and how she narrates it is something you want to hear. There's a whole narrative there, even though you're doing really boring stuff like, pick up 5 of these things. It's still interesting. Another area I think the game can really improve is with the creatures. They don't feel like much of a threat currently, and their attack patterns are just very, very predictable, and they don't really ever respawn, which to me just feels weird. I feel like once you've killed off kind of the enemies that are out there, that it's kind of devoid of life. So I think they got to do something with that in order to make it, to make your health bar mean something, besides how much fall damage you can take from jumping off your factory. Now I have seen more creatures as I've gone and explored out into other areas, but I've yet to really find anything that's all that threatening, that I couldn't pretty much just face tank. Now with that, I'm not saying that it has to be like Factorio where these things spawn up with all the pollution and they attack you and it has to be this tower defense system, although that would be really cool. I don't really think that's what this game is really about. I think this game is more like a city sim where you're kind of working the logistics, it's pretty casual, you're just having fun, and less a frantic race against the alien races that are trying to kill you and to build a rocket to get off the planet. So I think that's just the flavor of the game, and that's the way it's going to be. Last but not least, multiplayer. It says it supports up to 4 players. I've seen some people playing with other people, but to me it also seems like a game that's maybe geared more towards playing single player. I'm not 100% sure. I've never really played a game like this with other people, so that one I don't really have an opinion on. But just kind of knowing my friends, this probably isn't a game for them, and this game feels like it's at home just fine as a single player game, so I'm good with that. Now for the elephant in the room. Well, the fact that it is only available on the Epic Store within the first year of sales. After that, they can pretty much put it wherever they want. How do I feel about that? Well, I'm kind of disappointed. I kind of wish it was available for anybody anywhere, with DRM free and all of that. But unfortunately, that isn't the way it is currently. They made a whole video on why they made the choices they did. I'll link that in the description below, or you can see it on the card here. For me personally, I haven't had an issue with the Epic Store. I know a fair amount of people that have had issues with the stores, and they probably won't pick it up through the Epic Store. They're just going to wait the year and pick it up after that. So I'm kind of indifferent on the whole thing, and I'm not really put off so much that I'm not going to buy it on the Epic Store. As far as my closing thoughts on the whole Epic Store, I hope it's the beginning of something better than it is the beginning of something worse. I like that they're kind of shaking up the whole industry a little bit as far as making it more affordable for people to publish their games and sell their games. There's a big price difference between the Epic and Steam Store. I like the fact that it's more of a curated content versus, let's be honest, some suspicious content that is being sold on other platforms. And I like that it has a program to help support the content creators. I just hope it actually becomes valuable for the content creators. I hope it does more good in the long run than the harm it's doing in the short run. So as far as my closing thoughts for Satisfactory, I like the game. I will be playing the game. You'll be seeing it uploaded here, but probably live streamed a lot more on my Twitch channel, so maybe check that one out. But I like it. I'm going to give it a play. I'm going to give it a try. It caught my attention enough, and I think the game, as far as its concept and what they're looking to do with it, is something that interests me. But I also would say that if you're kind of on the fence, you might just want to wait to see what more is in the game once the rest of the content is revealed. It is early access. They're going to be adding more stuff to it, so you might have to judge your time that you really are ready to jump into this game. So that's my closing thoughts on it. If this is the game for you, then I'll see you in the game. Otherwise, maybe subscribe, check it out, check back with me later. Otherwise, check back later and my thoughts may have changed. I don't know. We'll just have to see. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day. Stay awesome. Peace. Brothgar out.